I'm Phil Croshaw, and a very warm welcome to this first edition of It's a Man's World, the podcast brought to you by Dads Unlimited. Today, we welcome Nav from Dads Unlimited to share the story of how Dads Unlimited came about and explore the massively important work being undertaken. So, a very warm welcome to the podcast, Nav. Tell us who you are and what you do.
Phil, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about what we do, what I do, and the impact we're having across the country. So, as I said, I'm Nav. I'm the chief executive of Dads Unlimited, which is a registered charity supporting men who are going through family breakdown across England and Wales, who are having difficulties seeing their kids or are dealing with some parental conflict, or even are dealing with issues that are connected to family breakdown. And in that, what we're trying to do is support them with their mental health. And that was the whole point of the charity, is to be a one-stop shop. So these men can come to us with difficulties around family breakdown, the impact it's having on them, if they've got difficulties with seeing their kids, any issues to do with the family court process. But above all, if they are struggling with their mental health and it's leading them to feel suicidal. That's what I wanted to achieve, is create this one-stop shop so the guys can come to us, get all the help they need in one place without being signposted to, oh, go and ring them, or go and ring that organization. And that's what we're trying to do, and raise awareness of these issues. But the other thing which came in, and I'll talk about this a bit more later on as well, we also support male victims of domestic abuse, which is also very under the radar in terms of the whole domestic abuse agenda. And what we're trying to do is shine a light on a small population of men who are being abused, and just saying that they need a little bit of help as well.
Yeah, I mean, such a topical area and so relevant today. There's no doubt about that. So I think the first thought in my mind when I came across you guys was, how did it all come about? Was it a part of your personal experience? And what was the drivers behind the whole thing?
So yes, I mean, everything DU does, everything we believe in, and everything we're trying to achieve is modelled around what I went through personally, how it made me feel, and when I realised this can't go on. So I'll gallop through it a little bit, but I'll touch on some sensitive areas. So I went through a divorce in 2013. Nothing unusual with that. Yeah, it was a simple case of uh, incompatibility. My wife at the time had met someone else, and so slightly tense. You can appreciate these things can be. We had
Yeah.
a son who was at the time, trying to roughly think, about 5 years old. And so it was just decided, okay, we better divorce. And I didn't think much of it. I was obviously upset. I didn't want my son. I was really hurt because I didn't want my son having mum and dad separate. I always wanted that intact family kind of uh, atmosphere and environments. But you don't always get what you want, do you, in life? So just trying to make it as amicable as possible. But very rapidly, within a couple of months, it started getting very difficult and tense, and the parental conflict really ramped up to the point where, when my ex moved out, my son was being shuttled between her house, my house, etc., etc. Obviously, Mine's got a new boyfriend, and my son kept complaining that he wasn't happy. He wanted to see me more. Uh, and he made some quite alarming disclosures of some of the treatment he was receiving. Now, I obviously was very worried about this, thinking, what on earth is going on over there?
Yeah.
Uh, and I, contacted my ex and just said, look, some of the stuff he's coming out with, I'm a bit concerned about this. But she kind of ignored me, said I'm making it all up. It's not true, etc., etc. But the dial kind of turned. I remember once, when I was dropping him off one evening, I was really worried about him, about my son, and I was also really worried about the new boyfriend on the scene, because of some of the nonsense stuff he had said to me. And then he, on a handover once when I was dropping my son off, he became quite verbally abusive towards me, which I thought, hold on a minute, I'm dropping my son off. He's 4 or 5 years old. That's not appropriate behavior. And so the red flags is just going
Yeah,
off. I was thinking,
understandably, yeah. Yeah.
there is something not right here. And where am I putting my son into? What environment? So he started coming, still going back and forth. He started making these disclosures. And then I started contacting the school, just said social services, just think, how can you have a look at this? No one replied. No one communicated. No one said anything. So I kept writing. I had the divorce was going on and all that kind of stuff. My lawyers at the time were like, this could be quite serious, but make a journal. Let's see where we go with this. Eventually, a social worker came along and said, okay, we'll investigate. And I knew as soon as I met this social worker, I was like, this is not going to go well. He treated me very unprofessionally. And I remember, I'll never forget this. I remember him sitting opposite me in my house saying to me, if you don't do as I tell you, I'm going to make your life hell.
Good God.
And I thought, bloody hell, what is happening here?
Yeah.
He did his investigation, and I was saying, look, there is something going on here. My son, I don't think is safe. But I don't think he looked into it. And so closed the case, moved out, and that was the end of that. But my son kept making disclosures. And so I contacted mum again. I said, look, I'm not happy with this. And she then said, right, you're not seeing your son anymore. I then, obviously, I had a really good job, and I was really struggling in the commute because my mind was elsewhere thinking about my
Mm,
son.
mm.
And I had a very, very high profile job, and I couldn't concentrate at work. And I had to start court proceedings around child arrangements and getting, a relationship back with my son, seeing him again, etc., etc. So went back to court, eventually got a shared care arrangement, which was basically a 50-50 arrangement. That was great. My son was back in my life again, but those 3 months were very painful. 3 or 4 months was just awful. I was going to work like a zombie, coming home crying because as soon as I opened the house, opened the front door, got in, I was deafened by his silence. It was just silent. Horrible feeling, absolutely horrible. And it
And
was
was there at that point in time then, Nav, was there a kind of that feeling that men can get at that point is that I'm a man, I shouldn't be getting upset, I shouldn't be crying? Or were you comfortable with that?
I was fine with being upset and crying. What I was not fine with was why is no one listening or taking me seriously?
Yeah.
That was the issue. I was like, why is my version of events or my voice or my thoughts or my opinions not getting any traction? And I was really concerned with this, really concerned.
Mm.
You know, I was kind of like, and I was thinking existentially as well with like, how as society have I got myself into a position where I'm feeling this? I've got real concerns about my son, and why is no one professional taking me seriously?
And
So,
did you think at all that you were on your own in that scenario at that point?
100%.
You thought this
100%. I knew I was on my own. I
it must
knew.
be nobody else can be experiencing this. Is
Yeah,
that what you thought?
absolutely. I knew I was on my own. I knew it. Absolutely knew it. And so, as I said, I got the 50-50 care arrangement, but my son kept saying, Dad, I'm not going to say what he said because
Yeah,
it's
no, yeah,
a good podcast, but
yeah.
he was just still making disclosures, which, like, for any normal parent, you'd be like, what is going on? The
Mm.
risk my son is under, like, you'd be pressing the alarm bell. So I continued to like write to social services, call the police, and you know, again, the same social worker came back, and this time with the police officer said, "Look, you're making up these allegations. You're making up these stories. If you're not careful, uh, we are going to arrest you for perverting the course of justice, and you should know better. And for the interim, we're going to stop you seeing your son again, even though you got a court order. We'll stop you because we're going to do another investigation."
Good Lord.
And that evening, I attempted to take my own life because I was like, I can't do this. And so that was my first suicide attempt,
Oh,
and obviously failed, but I'd never felt so low. And then within weeks of that, my manager at work was like, "You're not concentrating, you're not this." So then I opened up at work, And bearing in mind, I worked for the biggest national health trust in the country. My manager at the time said to me, "I think you've got your priorities wrong." And I couldn't believe she said that. I just like, what? When I was like, the pain that I was going through, I remember like on the handovers when I'm dropping my son off, and I'm sure our parents can relate to this. It was like I had to. So he was like chewing gum. I had to pull off me to hand him over because he didn't want to leave me, and he was crying and da-da. And this stuff was just going through my head. With I'm putting him back somewhere because I have to. But what's he going through?
Devastating. Absolutely
And
devastating.
I couldn't believe that. The hospital I work for just. In the end, I just like I quit. So in a short space of time, I quit my job. Didn't have any money, and was going through a tough divorce. Not seeing my son again, and it was just awful. And so time moved on a bit more. The court order was reinstated, and he kept seeing me again. And then a new social worker was appointed. She went through the whole process again. Another investigation, didn't find anything wrong. And I was like, "Dear." To the point, I was like, this is getting crazy. I'm going to skip a few months. We had 4 social services investigations with 4 different social workers. And interestingly, the female social workers were a lot more understanding, but the male social workers were really horrible. I mean, it got to the point where I had to get my dad round because I said, "Dad, I can't face these men on my own because they scare me." I was like developing PTSD. So, like I said, this was just going on, investigation after investigation, but nobody was getting to the rub of it. It just seemed so.
You'd have thought that, absolutely, but you'd have thought that the men would be more empathetic, being men.
Yeah, you would have thought so, but the way I kind of worked it out, I think it was almost, I got the impression that they were overcompensating for being men. And so that
Yeah.
they were trying really hard not to be discriminatory or trying to be perceived as having a prejudice. And I get that. I do completely understand that. I've
Mm,
got no issue with that.
mm.
But what they were failing to get in all of this was, is there potentially a child at risk? So anyway, this just went on and on and on. And then at the last kind of like investigation, they were like, again, I was faced by the school, the police. You're making this up, etc., etc., etc. And I realized like my son was at risk, and I am failing catastrophically to champion his voice. No one was taking me seriously. And so my lawyer at the time said, "Look, the only thing you can do is just keep a journal because this is absolutely shocking, but that's all you can do." And I remember, with another police officer visit, it's the same old stuff. You're making up, you're coaching, da 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 da. It was like all the guns were kind of like aimed at me, and no one was looking at what else is going on. I was very lucky. I read the Baby P inquiry, and I was actually not involved in it, but I was in and around that time and era. And I remember there was a quotation out of in the inquiry which said, professionals showed a worrying lack of curiosity. And I was seeing this here. There was no curiousness. There was no one was listening to me as a man, as a father, having some kind of paternal instinct to say there's something going on here. But anyway, like I said, they had made me a mess. I had poor mental health. I didn't want to leave the house. I was too scared of going out. Every doorbell, every phone ring, every brown envelope that's coming through the door just left me in a really bad place. And then, of course, the last police visit with you're not seeing him, or you're making this up, led to the second suicide attempt, which I realised had broken me. But I was also doubly broken because I'd failed at the second attempt, and I thought to myself, well, you can't even do that. You can't even do that. You're
Yeah,
useless.
it's getting
You are now.
becoming
You are
huge.
the complete failure.
Yeah.
Not only can you champion him, you can't even do that. And I remember after that just being very, very, very broken and scared, and just I didn't know what to do.
And is it
But
significantly better now? Are you kind of out of the woods in terms
well,
of that
so what
level?
happened was So
Uh,
what happened? So
um,
weeks after that, in January 2015. So bear in mind, this traumatic period of my life was running from approximately September 2013, and we got to December 2014. So nearly 18 months. Then in Jan 2015, I was at home, and I was with my cousin at the time. I had a knock on the door, opened it, and it was another social worker that I'd never met. And I was like, oh, God, here we go again. And she said, hi, I've looked through your case file, and I just wanted to let you know, I'm really sorry that no one's really communicated with you. I'm sorry no one's written to you. I'm sorry about what's all happened. But we've investigated. There's been an incident, and you've been right. For 18 months, your son has been harmed, and
oh,
I'm here to let you know
mighty, that's
that
unbelievable.
you need to go to school now. You need to pick him up, and we would support a hearing for you to have a transfer of residence, so he lives with you now forever on your own. And it was I mean, my cousin was here, and I remember him saying, I don't think he's heard you. You're going to have to repeat that all over again. And
Yeah.
that's things
Yeah.
changed January 2015. And the really annoying thing, this what so wound me up. They came on January the 30th, 2015. The incident where he was harmed and checked over by ambulance, taken to hospital, blah, 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 was January the 15th. So for 15 days, they didn't tell me. I didn't know. I knew 15 days after the event, not on the day of the event, not even 24 hours after the event, 15 days after the event. But I then went to court, got a transfer of residency, and then he came live there, 5.5, 6 years old, and it was just me and him, which was fantastic. But obviously, we had to deal with each other's trauma. He had his counselling, I was having my counselling, blah blah blah. But then another journey started. Had no job, no money, and realised that I'm now a single dad. I've got to do all the school runs. I've got everything. And
Yeah.
I realised then I was signing on at the job centre. I remember my job centre guy was saying to me, because I can't place you, because I can't get you a job. You're overqualified, overexperienced, and you've got a court order that says you've got to do the school runs. I don't know how we're going to place you, because those jobs going to want you 60 hours a week.
Yeah.
The jobs that you could do won't help you because you're too experienced and you know more than the others. And it was like, great. I was on the dole for like 2 years, whilst at the same time trying to be a single dad and realizing that I was taking my son to school, picking up. No one talks to you as a single dad. They didn't make any friends. No, there's no community of single fathers there going, oh, you want to come for a coffee afterwards? All my mates were at work. And so my life was just revolving around my son and me. Couldn't go out because I had no childcare. I tried to get a job. I contacted au pair agencies, childminders agencies, and I'm bearing in mind, this is going back a few years. The au pair agency said, oh, we don't place anyone with single fathers. Couldn't find a single father childminder. I just couldn't find anything for single fathers. I couldn't get a job because I couldn't get the childcare. And I realised, I'm like, this is barrier after barrier after barrier. And
Absolutely.
I'm not an idiot. And I was like, I don't know what to do, because we need money. Can't live on 72 quid, whatever it was, a week. I was not eating. I was making sure my son was eating. And I did it in such a way that we, through clawing of nails, kept hold of the house, got the bills done, but made sure that he didn't feel the impact of the poverty that we were in. But it was a struggle. And then it was just a friend of mine that said, oh, sorry, I missed out a bit. And I reached out to other helplines, agencies. I got nowhere. I didn't get the help I needed. And so around March-ish 2017, I was talking to a mate about it, and I was like, I've got to do something about this. I'm sure there's other men like me, but there is a massive vacuum of support for single parent fathers. Like, there's nothing out there. There's not even a dad and toddler club. There's no dad and whatever swimming club. There's nothing, So I started Dads Unlimited as a Facebook page, and then one or two guys who found it online went, oh yeah, I've been through similar. And then I was like, oh, hold on a minute. And then I started helping them with their issues and their difficulties, and we started communicating. And then my mate said to me, I think you're onto something here, but you need to turn it from a Facebook page into something. And so through the help of some local community organisations, got it registered as a charity in September 2017. our local police and crime commissioner gave me some small funding to set up a support group meetings. And yeah, in 6.5 years, this thing has grown from that to this national charity helping, nearly 800, 900 men a year for all sorts of issues to do with family breakdown and male victims of domestic abuse. I think we're clearly easily the number one leading men's fathers mental health charity in the UK around family breakdown. And yeah, the whole thing is just taken me by complete surprise. But it's everything, like I said at the beginning, that I didn't have. We do everything, mentoring, the co-parenting workshops, the discovery male victim rehabilitation programs, the barrister representation service, which is a jewel in the crown of really agitating the family law market to make family law litigation affordable. Mental health counselling, mentoring. It's the whole thing in one place. Because I know when I went through my stuff, it's not only you get different phone lines or helplines, this and the other. I don't want that because blokes in really bad places don't have. They don't. You give them 6 phone numbers, they won't ring any of them. You say, "Oh, okay, you can get everything here. We'll help you through everything." That's what I needed, so that's what this is, and it's about raising the voice of children that dads are trying to support and say, "Look, we have equal amounts of value at the parenting table. We are just as good at highlighting risk as anyone else, and we want to be taken seriously just like anyone else." And that's what this whole mission was about, was to say we've got to do something better because suicide is a national killer for men under 55, and then we've got empirical evidence that links that to family breakdown. So we've got to do something about that, and that's what DU does. It sits at the intersection between family breakdown, suicide prevention, and domestic abuse, and raise awareness of men who are victims of domestic abuse, and raise awareness that these guys need help as well. And this is, as I said, the existential bit was we as a society have got into a really a really horrible place. Yeah, that looks at that family breakdown as oh well, you'll get over it. No, because the impact of it can have such a detrimental effect on the man, because that man is going through not only an identity crisis of, oh my god, I thought we were married, we're not now, we're separating, I'm going to have to rebuild my life, blah blah blah, but I want to be that dad, I want to be an active hands-on father, and the system isn't letting me. It's all this stuff we've got to talk about and go, if we do this better and have much more cerebral dialogue over it with important people, we can make a difference to the suicide issues around men under 55. And so that's kind of like, what we're doing. And there are so really difficult things around this. You just look at the welfare state and child benefit. I had to apply, and my ex had to relinquish the child benefit to allow me to have it. That's not how it should work. The system is catching up with it.
Absolutely. Can I just say at this point, thank you for being so candid, because there's certainly, I mean, I'm generalizing massively and I'm aware of that, but certainly when it comes to men, it's very rare for people in the UK in particular, and probably for men, to actually share that level of detail and that level of pain. Which leads me on to another question in a way, actually, Nav, which is, how tricky is it to get people to engage with, I should say really, to get men to engage with you based on this cultural closeness of men don't talk about feelings? Is it a challenge to get these guys to open up to you and engage with you?
That's exactly what I thought would be. I thought it's going to be a real challenge. Hence why I share my story, because it opens the emotional door for others to exchange their stories. And in the initial days, yes, it was a little bit tricky for these men to open up. But do you know what? It didn't take them long for them to absolutely open up fully. And what caught me by complete surprise was how readily and quickly they were to share their pain. And I think I kind of sussed it out with, I think there's an emotional transaction that goes on, especially on between like our charity and me and the man who's telling me their stuff, that there's an exchange of trust and hope. And it's instant that, oh my God, I'm being listened to.
Do you think it's almost like almost like maybe a volcano that's bubbling
Yeah,
beneath the surface, and they're
yeah,
almost like given permission by
that's it.
you and your people
That's it.
to share?
Because we
And
have
it's
met loads
like
of men.
like a
Yeah, we've met like thousands of men, right, who won't tell their mum and dad, who won't tell their brother, who won't tell their sister, but they'll tell us.
yeah,
And I think it's because we automatically are there not to judge. We're automatically going, so what's going on, mate? And they open it, and you're spot on. It's like Krakatoa. It's just whoosh, out it
yeah.
comes.
Has
And
it helped? Has it helped at all, the fact that male mental health has become a lot more of a mainstream topic of discussion in the last few years? Does
yeah,
that
no,
help or
definitely. Yes.
culturally?
Yeah, no, so I've got a slightly different take. Yes, it's definitely helped, etc., etc. But I think, and I'm not, I haven't completely made my mind up on this because I'm still sort of percolating away. But I don't know if the mantra that men find it very hard to open up is actually a thing. I think men find it very easy to open up, provided you provide the right environment.
Yes.
I think that's the key. I think they're literally waiting to tell you everything, but there's a judgment factor. Now, when I went through my story earlier, I was being judged through the whole thing.
Mm.
And I think that's what these men are. They're feeling like they're being judged. And we've got to stop the judgment and just allow them to talk. And I think if you provide the thing or the vehicle or whatever it is that they can talk to without fear of judgment or whatever, they'll open up. Where they fear is when they talk to their immediate family because they're afraid or embarrassed of what they're going through. That's the problem. To strangers, they're singing.
Yeah, I guess the word that springs to mind here, I guess, is trust. But I'm
Mm.
thinking how much of that trust could be eroded very, very quickly early doors. So, for example, if they open up to the social worker that you talked about, and they get even slightly a response that you got, that's going to be, well, I tried and I got shut down immediately, or I got
Exactly.
ridiculed.
And do you know what? You make a brilliant point.
Yeah.
So we've been working with our local authority at the moment on father inclusive practice, and we're saying to them, to the social workers and this, that, and the other, the really important thing to remember is this: you may only have 30 seconds to build that trust with that man because he feels like he's being judged. But if you give him the opportunity and you listen to him, don't treat him just treat him equally and fairly, and you'll be fine. And you're right. It's those interactions with professionals that make things very hard. I mean, I remember, so after my story I was talking to you about, after my son was moved to my care and blah, 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 blah. Oh my God, the social workers in their droves. Oh, we need to have a meeting on this. We need to do this action plan. But like they were falling over each other to help because they know they got it wrong. And I remember sitting in one of those meetings and I said, look, it's all great, but now you're listening to me because it's been proved right. But here's a question I don't think you could answer. Who protects our children from the people who are paid to protect our children?
Yes, absolutely.
Because,
Yeah.
I followed the rules. I escalated to all of you the difficulties my son was in because you're paid to protect him. But you didn't. You didn't protect him. So who protects him from you?
Yeah.
And that's me. And I remember my lawyer at the time saying, "Oh, now if you've got a great case for negligence, you can do this, you could sue and da." I was like, "Nah, because all that's going to do is nothing. Let's create a charity and let's teach them how to be better."
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, you started this in Kent, and now you're looking at ambitions of going UK wide.
We're already UK wide. I think
Yeah.
the real problem we've had is I remember one of my very important funders said to me, "Nav, I think the genie's already out the bottle." We're already supporting men across the whole of England and Wales and a little bit into Scotland and Northern Ireland as well. And I think what we have demonstrated through very good evidence and data, I think we've lifted up a rock that society has kind of always known is there, but never known what to do with.
Mm, I think
And
that's
we've
right.
lifted it up and said, right, what are we going to do about it? And we're not putting that rock back down. What we're saying is, if you look at it, there is an impact on mental health. So as in health, public health, education systems, Department of Work and Pensions, the justice system. There are so much stuff here that actually could be linked to issues associated with the high rates of men killing themselves under the age of 55. We need to do something about this, because we must not have a situation of another man going through what I went through, or my son going through what he went through again. And that's kind of the motivation. So yeah, we have tried to keep it only Kent, but it's impossible. The cat's out of the bag, Phil.
No, I can well believe it, and I just think it's absolutely fantastic. And like you say, I think your story is probably repeated all over the place, and as you'll
Yeah,
probably be finding out now, as more and more people come
yeah.
forward.
You know what the tragedy is? My story is not unique.
Yeah, yeah,
That's the
no,
tragedy.
no, no,
and the volume of men who just don't get believed. That it's I don't know why that is. I mean, one could opine and say, oh, is it because if you look at the education system from primary school, it's generally very female orientated, not many male role models. Social work is very heavy on the female side, and none of this is there's nothing wrong with any of that, but it's balance. I think there's a lack of balance in that. And one of the things DU is, and I make sure the charity focuses on this. We don't do any activism. We don't do any campaigning. I don't want any of this nonsense stuff around, men's right movements. We don't do any of that. We use clear stories, case studies, evidence of what's going on and how can we help. That's it.
yeah, no, it makes absolute sense. Right, okay, well, that's fantastic. I know we're going to have you on again. I've already mentioned about we're having you on again, and there's absolutely no doubt that we need to get you on again as well. Just finally, then, slightly aside, but really relevant. What's the situation now with funding then, Nav? Because obviously there's a lot of challenges as we're recording this at the moment in the economy, etc. Is it fair to is it a fair assumption on my part that funding and everything is a challenge that is almost relentless?
Yeah, it is a hamster wheel of a situation
Yeah,
every single year. And I
yeah,
think the cost of living crisis, the fact that, you know, income that we could have got, we don't get anymore. This year we've already been told by lots of local authorities there's no more money in the budget for charitable endeavours. So
yeah,
yeah, it's really hard. And I think that the thing we need now is more long-term funding solutions, because the volume of demand coming through our helpline and our websites, etc., isn't reducing. What is reducing is my team's capacity to support, and we are now at that unfortunate stage where we're going to have waiting lists, and that to me is really sad, and it does upset me, because I don't. God, imagine if I was on a waiting list when I explained my story. I don't want that for anyone else. So yeah, funding is a major issue. But all charities are in the same boat, really, I suppose.
yeah. They are. I work with quite a few, and it's very similar story. So, how do people find out more about Dad's Unlimited then, Nav? How do people get in touch with your
So
website? Thing?
go to the website www.dadsunltd.org.uk. We've got the usual presence on social media platforms, um, and you'll probably find everything you need to know through that. And then we've got our helpline, which is on the website as well. So it's 01233 680 150 for family breakdown issues, or 01233 680 170 for male domestic abuse issues. But yeah, reach out and we'll do our best to try and help you.
Fantastic. And of course, we call this call this podcast "It's a Man's World," but of course, we've put a question mark on the end of that, haven't we? And that's
Yeah,
based around the fact that that's one of the well-known sayings. It's a man's world, but is it really a man's world when you look at some of the challenges that men
yeah,
have, just in the same way that women have, and just as the
yeah,
same way that
yeah,
LGBT and so on and so
yeah,
forth.
exactly. I think at the end of the day, you know, from a father's perspective and being a father's charity, etc., the key for us is we're just going to re-inject the value fathers play in their children's lives. That's it. we are just as valuable, just as important, and we've got to reset the dial on that.
And also, just something else is coming to my head. I said it just would go off on all sorts of
Yeah,
angles.
yeah, fine.
I did say that. And just thinking about one of the things that stands out for me is role models. And I'm going to put this in inverted commas here, do celebrity role models, male role models, can they make a difference to younger people in particular, perhaps, where, they've maybe not had the fortune of having a role model at home in terms of a father who's responsible, for want of a better phrase. Are those role models quite key in helping people to open up a bit?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think, celebrity endorsements and the magnification of positive male role models is very important, very, very important. Because don't get me wrong, look, we're a dad's charity, but there are some dads out there who are probably not the greatest of dads, you know, and
Mm.
therefore, if you look at it from another point of view, they're those children who have absent dads, or even widows, some kids whose fathers have passed away. Constant reminders of positive male role models is very, very important. You need Kids need both their parents, you know.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I happen to ask that because I've seen certain interviews that, in this day and age with, I guess, Tyson Fury is perhaps an example opening up. Gary Neville interviews a lot of sports people who will open up about some of their
Yeah,
challenges, which I guess must be helpful.
yeah.
So Nav, thanks very much for joining me today in this first episode of It's a Man's World, and we'll get you back on very, very soon. But thank you, and again, thank you so much for being so candid in your story.
No worries,
Fascinating.
no worries. Thank you very much, Phil.
Thanks, Nav. Bye bye.